let's start with the Joker and the OKC Thunder against Denver, and Denver coming in gassed. I mean, they really tightened their rotation. OKC's been chilling. They rested their guys late in the season. They played like 6 games in the last 4 weeks that actually mattered here. So Austin, you and I were chatting yesterday, and I was like, okay, I think OKC could kind of cruise. And I looked in a little bit more, writing match. I was like, man, this seems like they could really dominate the series. But what kind of edges do you think OKC has against this Nuggets team?
Yeah, so I think we should start with game one because I think a lot of listeners will be curious on our takes on sort of like the rest versus rust. I know in baseball there's been a lot of recent talk about how the wild card round isn't as beneficial to the division winners as you may think because those days off can be too much. And I don't know if that's the case in basketball. I would lean that more rest is better, even if as long as they've been practicing and stuff. So like if given the choice between OKC that's been resting for a week plus or Denver who just came off a 7 game series and gets like 1 to 2 days of rest, I would obviously take more rest than less. And then as far as the series goes, I think the series is priced pretty steeply towards OKC. I don't really see a lot of value on the series. I did bet at OKC -9 opener for game one, but I think Denver is matched up okay as with OKC just as far as I think Jokic is a really, really tough for OKC to deal with. And historically, like I think in previous years, they've been built decently to beat them, but they've lost some shooting. There's no more KCP. And it's worth noting that in the first round series, a lot of Denver role players that you would not expect to shoot as well as they did in round one, you would not expect them to shoot that level going forward. And I'm talking about Christian Brown and Russell Westbrook. So, and then Michael Porter Jr. obviously has the shoulder thing still. So, you're gonna have to beat OKC with shooting, and like I'm just not really expecting those Denver role players to shoot that well again because they're not good true shooters.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Denver's not a big corner threes team either. That's been kind of OKC's weak spot that they always kind of give up. So they don't have that. And also their strengths are right where OKC's strengths are. OKC's arguably the best rim defense, one of the best transition defenses. That's where Denver makes its money, and not being able to do that is going to really, really hinder them. They're going to need like Jamal Murray to take it to Dort. But Dink, anything you think where Denver could kind of score enough to hang around this OKC, because they're going to certainly play a style of offense that they're not going to really want to.
Yeah, I think OKC's defense will probably make Denver adapt to taking some of those corner threes, specifically Aaron Gordon. So much of Denver's offense is built upon Aaron Gordon kind of working down in that dunker spot or cutting down the baseline to kind of help take advantage of teams putting pressure on Jokic or around the rim. It's really hard to do that against the Hartenstein-Chet combo in terms of rim protection there. So I think you'll see Aaron Gordon kind of spaced out to the corner a little bit more. I think he'll probably have higher three-point volume. He's done well to shoot and improve his shot this year. Just generally, he did not shoot particularly well in the opening round, just 29% from three in the opening round, but on the season, he was up over 40% this year from three, like shot the ball really, really well for the season from three. So I think that'll be, an adjustment that Denver needs to make because they want to try to get stuff closer to the rim, but it's going to be tough. I think they're going to try to ultimately have to play a little bit more 4-out around Jokic and also try to, invert some stuff, use Jokic at the perimeter a little bit more to space out their offense. The big challenge that they have is since they are typically a low volume 3-point shooting team, they have to kind of stack up possessions through rebounding and then 2-point efficiency. That's like ultimately how they're able to be so good. The rebounding side of things, they still should have some advantages there, although OKC has shored that up quite a bit. But the other ways to create excess possessions in terms of turnovers and forcing turnovers is much more in favor of Oklahoma City. So if they're going to close that gap in the 3-point volume in this, I think they're going to need to invert some of their offense a little bit. Also, it's known that so much of the Denver's offense is built around the Jamal Jokic 2-man game, and that was largely the case, in the first round. But in Game 7, that 2-man game was kind of pinched in on by the Clippers defense quite a bit, and it led to a lot of 3-point shooting volume from the role players. And Christian Brown was excellent in Game 7, was not great for the series, shot just 32% for the series, but was excellent in Game 7. Aaron Gordon was excellent in Game 7. Russ was great throughout the whole series. I think some of the things that you saw from Denver's offense in Game 7 against the Clippers are going to be transferable into this series in terms of what they are asked to do, because I think the primary defenders on Jamal Murray are going to pinch in collapse some of the space that he has, whether it's Alex Caruso, Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, whoever kind of gets that assignment. There's lots of names that they can throw at that assignment to try to find solutions. And so I think you're going to have to see the others really, really play well. We saw that they were able to do that in Game 7 against the Clippers. Whether they can sustain that for a whole series is tough. They have to play at that level to even have a chance, I think, to win this series. But as we saw in round 1, like, Jokic is just an incredible processor of information and will just make the right basketball play over and over and over again. So your offense is generally going to get pretty good shots, even if you're against really, really good defenses, because Jokic will just figure it out. It's just a matter of whether the role players can shoot above their career norms. It's not going to be as wide open as Russ was left with the Clippers. The OKC is going to close out many more times than the Clippers closed out on them. But I think, Denver offensively, they have paths to be successful here. The question for me for Denver is more on the defensive side, which they really stepped up their performance in that opening series. Jokic was way better in the postseason than he was in the regular season in terms of number of contests, in terms of opponent field goal percentage at the rim, all those different things. But you now get to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander isolation ball, and there's not a lot that Denver really has to be able to throw at them without their best isolation defenders are bigger guys, Aaron Gordon, Peyton Watson, without throwing off kind of the balance of the rest of the rotation in terms of who's on Chet Holmgren and different things like that. So I have more concerns for Denver defensively than I do offensively, even though I recognize Oklahoma City is the best defense in the league and will make things very tough on Jamal Murray and Jokic in the two-man game.
Yeah, and as I was saying, Denver's last in corner 3-point rate, 7.5%. Russ got a bunch of corners threes in the last series, 2.8, 6 and 6 there as the Clippers kind of left him. So yeah, I think Russ will be pretty interesting there. But yeah, I agree that it's I don't know. I've got concerns about their offense. They just got so, like you were saying there, Dort, Cason, Alex Caruso, J-Dub, SGA's like they've got like so many guys that are just going to kill them. So, limiting that two-man game, I think they're as well equipped as anyone to do that. Having the length, having the switchability, and just making them play in the half court is going to make it tougher there. But on the other side, Austin, do you think anything where OKC could kind of like make some money? Obviously, SGA, credit to Christian Brown. Christian Brown really knocked Harden off his game later there. But do you think SGA, who had kind of a quiet first round, do you think he can get back on track? Obviously, when I was writing up matchups, it's like, OKC's so big, man, in the front court. Like, they're so mismatched on J-Dub. We saw Desmond Bane guarding J-Dub last round. He killed him. So, do you think that it's more of like a SGA series or more of like a J-Dub, Dort, a Hartenstein, Chet kind of a series?
So, typically, like, Michael Malone defenses have been let the main guy beat you and just kind of show and recover, and then kind of like blitz him a little more in the fourth. But they have historically been more susceptible to like a main guy than maybe like a OKC would be to itself, or Miami, or one of these super heavy help defenses. We don't really have a playoff sample with Adelman to know for sure. What I was going to say is the main key for OKC is just turning Denver over, and like when they got Caruso, I initially thought we should lower everyone's steal rate because there's only there's only one ball to steal. Like between Caruso and SGA and J-Dub and Cason Wallace, all these guys have mass steals. And as it turns out, like apparently they can just lead the league in steals by a huge margin, and there is enough possessions that they can just steal the ball. And Denver historically has been a really good at taking care of the ball. But this year, losing KCP, adding Russ, they've gone to very league average. And I think if Denver does not take care of the ball, this could be an ugly series. And one thing I wanted to note is in the last series, we were reminded about how good Russell Westbrook could still be at this age. But I think this series is one where we might be reminded again. It could get ugly, I think, for Russ. And I think his emergence last series made it so that Denver went from 4 healthy players to 6 somewhat usable players. And I just don't think that this is going to be a good series for Russ. I think they're going to really take care of the ball. I don't think the main ways that Russ scores, I think OKC really takes away. And so, yeah, if Denver cannot take care of the ball, I think sort of when you saw OKC go on these mega runs throughout the season, it's because they chain together stop, turnover, turnover. And I think if Denver, can't avoid that, then it'll be a short series.
Yeah, I mean, the turnovers in the first round were crazy. 19 turnovers per game for the Grizzlies. As you noted, Denver turned it over a little bit against the Clippers. But, yeah, and just to kind of talk a little bit more OKC, we saw you mentioned the help. Like, they were helping a lot. They were just leaving Chris Dunn. Obviously, the lineup change happened there. Derek Jones got hot early. I don't know if they could do that with Lou Dort, man. I mean, Lou Dort has been really good catch and shoot guy, shooting in the 40s. They're going to leave him. He's shown he could consistently hit that shot. So I think Lou Dort's in a pretty big spot here. I said in matchups column he has the best matchup just because they're going to kind of leave him with the way they're going to have to send a little bit of help to SGA, a la the way they did with the Clippers. Do you have any thoughts on other secondary pieces that could kind of push up this offense?
Yeah, I mean we certainly saw with Adelman more of a willingness to sort of like leave the weak link, and so Dort would seem to be that, maybe Case and Wallace, depending on kind of the lineups and approaches here. But yeah, I think in general, like with OKC, they just have so much depth that it could be anybody that could end up being the guy who kind of gets hot from three and closes that gap and makes it so that, you can't kind of leave them and then opens the floor back up for the main guys. The difference, I talked about this with the Clippers and Nuggets series, and one of the reasons that I was on the Clippers was I thought the depth of the Clippers would ultimately give them more outs and more ways to play compared to Denver. And I think that was true, but I think Denver ultimately just their best players played better in game 5, and then their role players played better in game 7, and that was ultimately like the difference between the series. OKC has even more ways to play than the Clippers because they have the way to play of mass size, where the Clippers, like their biggest units, that they could throw out there with like Batum over Dunn, were still, kind of relatively on par size wise with the Nuggets. The Nuggets aren't often, and this is why Minnesota's given them so many problems in the last couple of years. The Nuggets aren't often the smaller team. And I think a lot of the different lineup combinations that OKC can get to here can play as if the Nuggets are the smaller team. And I think that's just an uncomfortable position for Denver as a whole.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you there. And their depth is so good. I think Peyton Watson could be somewhat valuable just to give some length to throw at SGA. So I think he could push up. We'll see. He might cut into Westbrook a little bit. As you were kind of saying, taking away the rim, taking away the transition. If he's not hitting corner threes, I think he's going to be kind of pushed out. And I could see that kind of being leveled up. Do you have anything you want to add there?
I was going to say this does seem like a Peyton Watson type series to me, but we'll see if Dave Adelman goes there. I mean, Russ has earned a lot of trust, so I think it's going to take some time. But the other thing about Denver is, like you guys are mentioning all the turnover aspects for OKC. That's one of the Denver strengths. They generally in the playoffs, they don't turn the ball over a ton because they just run so much through Jokic and Jamal, and that two-man game is like so efficient that it cuts down turnovers. So that'll be an interesting spot for Russ, who has had the ball less in his hands in the playoffs, but in games that play into transition more, he certainly can. But yeah, I'm interested to see. I think it'll take some time before we get there because I think Russ has just earned a ton of trust from Adelman. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking game 4, game 5, like Russ getting a little bit de-emphasized and Peyton Watson getting a little bit emphasized. But the problem with Peyton Watson is he has to be able to take and make open shots, and oftentimes he won't even take them, and that stalls out. You cannot pass up a good shot against OKC because you're not getting a better shot. The first good shot you have against OKC, you have to take. I know the broadcast was honing in on that in the opening round against Memphis, that at times guys were passing on like a good shot, and like you just can't. OKC doesn't give you 2 bites at the apple.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
On that note, I was gonna make a bold take. So I agree that Russ, I think, will get the first crack at it because he's earned that trust. And I think if it goes poorly, I do agree Peyton Watson's kind of the next adjustment. But like Drew said, like there's some questions about him being able to make open threes. He is a good like off-ball cutter, but if they start leaving him open, my bold take is I think the next progression we will see Jalen Pickett or Julian Strawther at some point this series. In the same way that Memphis didn't want to play Luke Kennard, but they kind of realized that's what you have to do versus OKC. I think I think there's a decent chance Julian Strawther gets in as a real rotation piece by the end of the series.
Yeah, to that point, it used to be, earlier in the year before they got Chet back, and last year there were 2 big weaknesses on OKC: rebounding and catch and shoot. And now it's not rebounding anymore. They're one of the best rebounding teams in the NBA since they've had Chet back. So yeah, I think that on top of just the weak spot there and just playing the variance game, right? Like they've got to know this team is so legit. They're 72-14 with the sweep and their season schedule. They're just a juggernaut. So I think leading into that shooting definitely makes some sense there. But yeah, just on OKC's bench, obviously we think Caruso is going to be a pretty big piece. But do you think Aaron Wiggins or Case and Wallace or anybody along those lines could get kind of pushed up and kind of compete with Caruso as one of the main bench pieces, Dink?
It's interesting because I think Aaron Wiggins is typically kind of the answer to teams that can get beat in transition a little bit and teams that have bigger size. Denver can fit the mold in both of those characteristics, but I think it's sort of as Russ goes, I think the more Russ plays, I think the more Kaysen plays, and the more Russ doesn't play, the more I think Wiggins could kind of get into the mix. But Kaysen's really good on ball defender, can pressure you up the court, can really one of the things that they can afford to do too with OKC, just they have so many defensive pieces, they can afford to press if they want to and challenge the ball up the court and really make Jamal work every second of every possession. And those are things I'm interested to see if OKC gets into as well. They just have so many levers that they can pull to put pressure on you defensively.
Yeah, just waves and waves of guys for sure. And then, so going into the series, as you noted, Austin, the rest versus rust. Hey, OKC was fine with the rest after in the play-in week, and the rest of their guys, they freaking beat Memphis by 51 in game one. So sounds like we're all on OKC here, but the question is how much or anything you want to add, Austin, and you can go ahead with OKC and how many.
No, I don't want to add anything. I think the series is priced fair, if not a bit steep for OKC. So I'm not betting anything on the series, but if we're just talking on a podcast about who we think is going to win the series from a non-betting perspective, I do think it's OKC here. I'm between 5 and 6 games. I'll say OKC. In 5, but it wouldn't surprise me if Denver took 2.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you. I still lean OKC in 5. I like you said, I was expecting, we talked about this, how mispriced the Memphis series was. So I thought there would be a little bit of that, but I think the market kind of readjusted just after demolition of the Grizzlies there. So I don't have anything on it as well. I think if I did bet it, I think I hate juicy bets, but obviously I think minus 285 for OKC game 1 and series parlay. I think that's probably the best way to play it. Dink, anything you got on this one and thoughts on this series?
Yeah, that would be the best way to play it in my opinion as well. I'm not betting anything on the series as well. It had moved over to Denver plus 600, and now it's Denver plus 570 on FanDuel, OKC minus 820. I do think those are starting to be extended prices for Denver. Just it's hard to imagine that the Nuggets are plus 600 to win a series with Jokic, but OKC's that good. So I'm not betting anything on it. I'm going to go OKC in 6. I think one thing that I will note when you're saying you think the market kind of adjusted, I think one of the other things is the market generally has a lot of respect for Denver. I think the last few years since they won the title, basically there's been a healthy respect for Denver in playoff series markets. That's why we were taking the Clippers. So I'll give Denver the nod that I think they can win 2 games. I think the series will be I think there will be a game or two that OKC blows the doors off, but I think this series will be competitive, and I don't think it will feel like the Memphis series. I think Denver's a much different team, and their top unit is much stronger.
Yeah,
Memphis can put out.
Yeah, Memphis was, I thought, even as bad as Orlando was, as bad as Miami was, I thought Memphis was the worst team in the playoffs. So definitely with you, it'll be closer. But yeah, all right, let's go to the other Western Conference series. The Warriors get a huge win. Just handle their business against the Rockets after the Rockets look like they built some momentum there. They're going to get a very rested Minnesota Timberwolves team here. Don't have much season series stuff. Jimmy didn't play in the season series. We saw kind of one game that was kind of had most of their guys, and the Warriors kind of squeaked out there. So, Austin, what are you looking at for this on edges and things to watch for this series?
Yeah, so it's funny that I'd rather talk about Minnesota because Golden State's hard to figure out, but I'm not sure that Kerr knows exactly how he's going to do it either. So Minnesota side, I mentioned this last pod, but what I really like about Minnesota is they and OKC are to me the 2 most live out of the West because they're the 2 most matchup proof. They can go small, they can go big. They have pieces to fit any type of matchup. And like if you see last series, like it was probably the worst series possible for Mike Conley. They didn't have a place to put him defensively. The Lakers have like no one smaller than Austin Reeves. They had to put him on Rui Hachimura, and the Lakers just loved a matchup hunt. The Warriors are the exact opposite. Like outside of Jimmy Butler, they don't have anyone that really goes to try and, unless you're gonna count Jonathan Kuminga, like they don't try and get switches. They have a much more motion offense. There's so many places that you can hide Mike Conley in the series, right? Like I think he's still good on smalls. Like you could even put him on Steph, which they probably won't do, but then you can hide him on, Moody or Buddy or Peyton. There's just so many places that you can hide Conley. And then on the other end, Mike Conley's still very additive offensively if you can live with the size and the defense. So, like navigating the Warriors' heavy help defense that's really good at taking stuff away from the rim, but also forcing turnovers. Like you would love to have Mike Conley there. You'd love to have Mike Conley as an off-ball shooter as well. So I think this is looks to be a much better Mike Conley series than the last one was. And then I think if Houston had advanced, this would be a Rudy Gobert series, but I think this is the second straight series where, you don't really need Rudy Gobert because he's not able to punish. He's not someone that can, outside of the last game of the series with the Lakers, like he can't really punish size, especially on his on like outside of offensive rebounding, he can't really punish smalls. Like Lou loves to go with Batum on Gobert, and so it doesn't matter that there's a huge height difference between Gobert and Draymond. Like I just don't know what Gobert is really going to do here, and so if Minnesota does fall behind, I would look at maybe a lot of closing Naz Reid. So Conley and Naz Reid are probably my two Wolves guys that I think could click the series.
Yeah, I think those two, and I think Jaden McDaniels is going to be kind of the big player here again. Nobody guarded Steph, according to the matchup data, more than Jaden McDaniels did. And Steph had a pretty good series, 28 per game. But when Jaden guarded him, he was very good when he wasn't kind of battling foul trouble there. But yeah, Steph, gets a tough matchup against Ahmed and then gets another one here. So I think that, I kind of I didn't joke. I said that Steph Curry was like the X factor. We did the preview. I kind of think it again. Like I think if Steph is able to take it to Jaden McDaniels in a positive way, I think that's kind of big. But anything else think on the Warriors offense that you think could kind of carry them against a pretty hot Wolves defense coming in?
Yeah, I mean, if he's going to get a long look at McDaniels, then Jimmy Butler's got what we think are favorable matchups. I will say Julius Randle held up much better defensively in that opening series than I expected. I think one of the big, we didn't recap the end of the Minnesota series, but I think one of the big things for me was how good Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards were from a decision-making perspective in that series. And I think if they have that kind of series again, I think they win handily against Golden State. Like if they take care of the ball and they get into good offense, I think they're in great shape, which I think is, why Austin's saying that, they have more room to do that with Mike Conley in this series. I'm surprised they were able to do that so well without Mike Conley last series, because that's been kind of the problem for Minnesota the last few years is without Mike Conley on the floor, they get very, very, disorganized and turnover prone. In agreement that even though Gobert really took advantage of the small ball lineups in Game 5 against the Lakers, it's just not the same as against the Warriors. They will put him out into space more from a motion perspective, and it's a little bit tougher for him as opposed to handling isolations out on the perimeter. I think he's fine in isolations out on the perimeter, but covering the motion stuff and then being a zero that Golden State can hide off of defensively makes it challenging as well. So largely in agreement with you guys there. I think Minnesota does have a number of guys that are pretty good screen navigators just generally. Like we're talking about Jaden McDaniels, but Nikhil Alexander-Walker is okay at that. Dante DiVincenzo is pretty good at that. So they have good pieces in depth again to deal with Steph Curry here. So I think it's got to be a big Jimmy series. Jimmy obviously has his feelings on the Minnesota Timberwolves organization. So we'll see if he takes out the revenge here on the Wolves. But I think it's going to be an interesting series from an emotional standpoint. Like Dre and Rudy Gobert have that big beef that's long standing, and Dre putting in chokeholds and whatnot. And Dre was very under control in Game 7. That was a big talking point about the Warriors' ability to advance. So I'm very interested to see all of those kind of extra emotional aspects of the series and how they kind of come out to play, because I think both of these teams can play emotionally, and at times it works for them, and at times it kind of goes overboard. And I think whoever kind of controls their emotions best in this series is probably going to be put in a better chance. But this is a tough ask for Golden State, one day off after Game 7, all this travel, and then Houston's about as physical a series as you're going to get, and the very next team that's about as physical as you're going to get is Minnesota. So like these are battles to kind of work through for the Warriors here.
Yeah, and Jimmy looked
we've had a
healthy.
lot
That
of
was kind of big. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we've had a lot of agreement so far since I've been on, but I would like to push back on one thing. I'm not certain that it's going to be a great Jimmy Butler series. I think that sort of he is pretty matchup proof, and I think Minnesota will kind of let him do his thing. In that, I agree, but I actually think for a couple of reasons that like the points per possession that you get with a Jimmy ISO, which you might want in other series, may not be that good here. It might be the path of least resistance, but I think Anthony Edwards is actually really well equipped to guard Jimmy Butler, and they may not want to do it for 48 minutes, but I think Ant has shown the willingness to guard the best players, and I think in the fourth, I think they could put a lot of Ant on Jimmy Butler, and I think Ant is a fantastic on-ball defender when he's engaged. And then also like they have other pieces who could guard Steph. I'm talking about Nikhil, and I'm talking about Dante DiVincenzo. So like they could shift Jaden down to Jimmy Butler as well if Jimmy starts cooking on Randall or whatever. And then the other thing I wanted to note is that Houston, as many good defenders as they have, they're very undisciplined, and they love to foul, and they love to sort of like hack when you're down in the paint. And Jimmy Butler lived at the free throw line in the games that he was good. Minnesota does not foul at all. Like they're bottom 5 in not fouling, and they just sort of have these really disciplined defenders and a good scheme, and they have Gobert at the rim if he's in. Like and especially the playoff whistle late in the series, like I think Jimmy may not get nearly as many foul calls, which is kind of what he lives on to score. And so then now you're living with sort of like Jimmy isolated pull-up middies. Still a decent shot, but definitely not going to be as efficient as sort of like one reason that I thought the Wolves really beat the Lakers was like if you looked at the shot quality between the two teams, every time down, maybe it was a Lakers favorable matchup, but it was still an isolated long two or whatnot. And Minnesota was generating these wide open either shots at the rim for penetration, blow-bys, or wide open corner threes. And so, like, again, this series, I do think the shot quality will be in favor of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Also, Jimmy was pretty good in ISO this year, 1.07 per possession. In the regular season was really bad against Houston with the way they were throwing people at him. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Ant's legit. We saw him guard LeBron and kind of put him in the torture chamber a la Dort with his physicality and a lot of length to kind of make it tough to hit those fadeaways there. So I think I'm kind of more with Austin. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for Jimmy. Than with just again, like there's no weak stuff to poke at with these guys, so I'm pretty confident there. And then their transition defense got a little bit better. I think that kind of helps as well. But do you think anybody besides those big two? We were kind of waiting to see who would kind of like step up. And my first thought here is like who steps up for the Warriors. And I talk about this all the time. Like, okay, we've got a guard problem on our hands. What's the answer? Like, it's Gary Payton. Like, that's the way Steve Kerr thinks. Do you think that Gary Payton could start? I kind of think he might. Or anybody else you think, or Draymond or anybody else, after the Jimmy Steph that could kind of step up in the series?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the belief that Steve Kerr has a Gary Payton fetish that needs to be extinguished. I think the Warriors in part advanced in Game 7 because I think Gary Payton was unavailable. I honestly think like he was a disaster for that series, and I don't know why they kept insisting on playing him when they needed floor spacing and shooting, and they were making everything easier for Houston defensively. I have the same concerns on how that would play out this series. I understand the idea of potentially like trying to slow down Anthony Edwards, but like Gary Payton, I don't think he's big enough to slow down Anthony Edwards. So like, I don't know. I don't think it's a great Gary Payton series. And I think if you guys are talking about having concerns offensively in terms of how the matchups match up for both Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry, like you need offense then in secondary offense and somebody who could potentially try to hunt Mike Conley a little bit. And so I don't know. I'm always thinking it's Brandon Podziemski and Buddy Hield or Moses Moody, like shooting. I think that's the path for the Warriors. But Kerr often opts for Gary Payton. I think you'll see a lot. I think you'll probably continue to see Quentin Post in this series because of the size that Minnesota brings to the forefront, even though he was de-emphasized quite a bit in Game 7 as well. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of what Gary Payton brings to the Warriors offense. And certainly Steve Kerr sees it differently than me. He's much smarter than me. But that's not the lever I'd pull in the series against Minnesota.
Yeah. Do you think that, why not just start the way they did last game? That lineup's been pretty good for them, plus 14 net rating in the 58 minutes they played against the Rockets. Obviously, Buddy Hield is red hot, 33-point game 7. So how do you think that they start this, Austin? Do you think that just kind of run that out there after having success last game?
Um, I I kind of think like Kerr is big about hot hand and what's worked recently and sort of
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
small sample lineup combos. Like he's the king of all those things. So
Yep.
um, and I don't mean that disparagingly. Like that's just how he has been. And so like I think they're going to start with what worked really well in Game 7. Like it seems really unlikely after Buddy Hield. Did he tie the playoff record for threes in a game? Like that he doesn't start the next series. So I do think it's going to be Pajemski and Buddy. And then I think as far as like closing units go, I think you have Steph, Jimmy, Dre. And then I think it's probably Pajemski and then one of Buddy or Moody, whoever is kind of hot that one thing I should note in Game 7 is Buddy Hield is a terrible defender that played really good defense in Game 7, and like even bad defenders can kind of have a good game occasionally, and he was really locked in, and I think that's what kept him on the floor for 37. Like people aren't talking about the 9 threes, but I guarantee if Buddy was sort of losing his guy, like he wouldn't have played 37 minutes. So
Hmm.
if Buddy continues to play well, I think that the spacing is more important than natural shot making, right? And so like as long as he's not being a liability on defense, I think it'll be Buddy. But I think it could be Moses. And then I think there will be times where Quentin Post is a decent matchup versus Gobert. But I think I'm rambling, but I think it's going to be Pajemski and then one of Moody or Buddy.
Yeah, Buddy was pretty good on Jalen Green. They put him on Green a bunch, and Green was really bad in Game 7. So yeah, I kind of lean there, but definitely think it could if Ant gets going. Like I said, Steve Kerr has the default of like going to Gary Payton there. We kind of touched on it that Naz Reid could be kind of a bigger factor. Talked about Dante DiVincenzo, but anybody Nickeil Alexander-Walker was kind of de-emphasized in the last series. But where do you think that the quote unquote X factor comes in for the Wolves on this side, Dink?
I think it's a more comfortable series for Nickeil Alexander-Walker to be on the floor, certainly. So I think you might see the minutes allocation a little bit more spread amongst the reserves than you saw in the last series where they were really trying to like get it up there for Dante quite a bit. So I think you could see Nickeil and Dante's minutes get a little bit more balanced this series potentially, especially if Dante's not shooting it well. And Dante did not shoot it well, very frustratingly, in Game 5 of that series, which honestly, that was the second worst playoff basketball game to me of the entire playoffs, by the way, that Minnesota closeout Game 5, because I think Minnesota should have won that game by 45 points.
Oh, my God.
If they had made any threes whatsoever. Like, it was just a completely non-competitive game that ended up being competitive because the Timberwolves could not make open threes.
And Jane foul trouble, and Julius Randle foul trouble, and Ant was bad. Like everything was working for them.
Yeah. Go ahead. So I think you'll see a little bit more balance there between Dante and Nickeil in terms of the minutes allocation. But other than that, no, I think it's a good series for Naz on the whole. He can do some of the things in terms of attacking the basket and offensive rebounding that Gobert doesn't bring to the floor, and defensively. The things Gobert adds value in are just not nearly as valuable against the Warriors, right? The Warriors don't do a ton of isolation. They've done more with Jimmy Butler. They don't really attack the rim a ton. They've done more with Jimmy Butler. So I think it's a good series for Naz Reid and Julius Randle to potentially outpace Rudy Gobert from a minutes perspective would be my guess.
And Austin, anything you want to add? It sounds like we're no one has like strong feelings here for this one. Maybe we get a disagreement. Where you at for this series?
I am biased in that I have a lot of Wolves out of the West futures, but I do think it's the Wolves here. I will say that I kind of expected the series price to open kind of minus 150, and it opened like minus 180. So like I'm not betting anything for this series. I actually think there's very slight value Golden State objectively, but I'm not going to bet Golden State here. I also think it's really hard to like, even though the Warriors' average age on the roster isn't super old, they're the only guys that are playing huge minutes are very old, and so like it's just really hard to see sort of like they like crawled their way out of that Rockets series with all three of their guys playing mega minutes. This series, if they do win, is going to go super deep. Like it's another grueling series. Like to see Steph, Jimmy, and Dre sort of come out of this next series with very little rest and then try and play another 7-game series, it seems really unlikely. I think I'm going to say Timberwolves in 7. But it's more likely, I think, that it's Timberwolves in less than it is the Warriors upsetting. It's kind of how I'm leaning.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same. I'll let Dink go first, and I'll cap it. Where are you at, Dink?
I was surprised. I thought you guys, I mean, the way you guys have been talking about the Wolves defense matching up with the Golden State offense here, I thought you guys were picking Timberwolves in a shorter series. I'm in agreement with Austin that, like, I'm staring at this plus 150 series line for Golden State, and I have not bet it, but it feels too wide to me. I thought I was going to get like plus 125. So I keep staring at it, and it's the only price on the board that I might bet, but I'm concerned of the buildup. And Austin alluded to, the only guys that they have that are old are the ones that are playing the biggest minutes. They're also banged up already. Like Jimmy's playing through the pelvic contusion. Steph's got this thumb issue that, is clearly a known issue that people are going to continue to hack and try to attack and whatnot. So I worry about the cumulative kind of effect of the wear and tear on all these guys. And I'm worried that it rears its head early in the series and gives Minnesota enough of an edge that it's kind of tougher for Golden State to pull back. So I like, the longer the series goes, the more I like Golden State. But if the series is short, I think it's short Minnesota. And so I'm going to go official pick. I'm going to go Minnesota in 6. But I do not feel confident in this. If Golden State was fully rested and I got this price, I would be taking it. If they had 2 more days off, like, I would be taking Golden State plus 150 in the series. But I'm pretty concerned about how this impacts Game 1, and how do I feel about Golden State, where I feel like their odds at Game 1 are a lot worse than the rest of the series. That's why I'm struggling with the plus 150 right now.
Yeah, I'm not betting it, but I'm with Dink. I'm Wolves in 6. I just think that it's I joke about it. Like, it's so hard to bet on the Wolves because the letdown factor is so high. But I think that the way they're playing, they've got enough depth. You talked about them being matchup proof, Austin. I think that kind of comes into play, and they could kind of beat them off the boards. They could beat them with 3-point shooting, which is an underrated part. I think the Warriors give up a lot of threes, and everyone thinks Minnesota's so big and bad and brutal, but like, they're awesome 3-point shooting team. So definitely there with Wolves in 6. Let's go to, and I'm not betting it. I'm not betting it. Let's go to the Eastern Conference here. Certainly, I don't think any of us are going to pick a long series on this one. The Celtics absolutely killed the Knicks all season, blew them out 3 times, 130 offensive rating over 4 games, got an overtime win. I think this is going to be real short here. Austin, do you agree? And if so, why?
I don't agree.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that this whole narrative that the Knicks can't beat good teams is probably somewhat true, but I think it's a bit overblown. Like, everybody talks about it, everybody knows about it. Like, you don't think that the Knicks are like, I just think that, like, yeah, they have struggled versus good teams, but like, what about the Knicks is making them this team that like other teams in this tier don't deal with? Like, obviously, the better team is probably going to beat the worst team in a series, but like, I don't see anything systematically about the Knicks that would make them so bad against bad teams. And I don't think Tibbs is such a bad coach that can't make any adjustments, that like they should be priced as this, bring down their price against really good teams in a way that no other team gets deemed for. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And the main reason I think the Celtics win here is just because I remain a huge Celtics bull. I think they are probably still the best team in the NBA for my money. Like, we just haven't seen them try, or like at all, in the regular season. And so I'm taking the Celtics here, but I think the Knicks are like a very, not only a very good sort of like AKA non-contender, but the way in which I didn't like backing Knicks on a back-to-back in the regular season. There's just no back-to-backs in the playoffs, and like, you can really get away with playing your guys mega minutes in ways that they're already conditioned for. And like, having Mitchell Robinson as a nice 6th player, he's not great for the series, but just having like 6 good players that Tibbs can run into the ground without any back-to-backs. I just don't think that the Knicks are like this team that should be heavily penalized in the playoffs in ways that they're being talked about. So I can't really see the Knicks winning the series. We can talk about predictions later, but like, I think that a lot of these games will be competitive.
Yeah, I just think that they have just a lot of ways to cover this. They've got a lot of, we saw with the Pistons, once Tobias Harris got in foul trouble, it was party time for Cat. Like, that's not the case. They've got Tatum. Brown could guard him. They've got Horford. They've got Porzingis. They want to go that way. I think Porzingis is going to start on Hart. So they've got that covered. They've got on-ball defense covered. They've got Derek White. They've got Drew Holiday. Jaylen Brown's been an on-ball defender. They could switch. I just think that they've got to be able to take the two-man game out of its comfort zone. I think is so big, and they're so good at taking away transition, first in the NBA and transition points per possession. Like, I don't know how they're going to score enough to hang around with them. So unless Cat like goes nuclear and hits shots like he was late in the Detroit series, I just think it's going to be a really uphill climb on top of just, the wings aren't going to be as productive here. So, Dink, how do the Knicks score enough is kind of my big thought.
Yeah, I think that's my concern as well. I think the 3-point volume is going to need to be ratcheted up a little bit for New York here. I'd like to see Karl-Anthony Towns take more threes in this series. Unsure if he will, but I'd like to see that be kind of one of the focal points for them. One of the challenges
real quick, he only took 2.8 per game in the season series, which is pretty low number for him.
I know it's super disappointing, and I think that's something that they'll need to ratchet up a little bit. Obviously, like Brunson has shown, whoever the defender is, it doesn't matter, right? Like Asar is, playing pretty strong defense on him. So the fact that Boston has Drew Holiday and Derek White, I don't think is like, a huge red flag for Jalen Brunson or anything. I think he's proven his worth in the playoffs. The concern is, the defensive responsibility that OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are going to have this series, where they don't have the ability to really like share defensive responsibilities, right? Because you have to deal with both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Whereas in a lot of series, you just have to deal with like one wing scorer or one big guard scorer, and you can kind of take turns with them. They don't get that luxury against the Celtics, and how does that impact their offense, I think, is a big concern. So I think you need to get a lot out of Cat, a lot out of Brunson. You probably need a little bit of help from the bench, which is not something that you're expecting, but you need a campaign game or a Deuce McBride game where those guys are making threes and kind of keeping things kind of moving along there. But yeah, I have my concerns about how the Knicks match up offensively. I think the good news is we did see, Orlando paint a little bit of a picture of like how you can make this annoying for Boston, right? You can be really physical with Boston. You can kind of try to drag them into the mud. And once you get them kind of into the mud, can you scratch out games? Orlando didn't have enough shooting to make it happen. I mean, they won game 5 in the shot quality metrics by like a wide margin and got destroyed in game 5, got absolutely blown out. They just didn't have enough offensive firepower. If the Knicks can get this series in the mud and they have the offensive, better offensive talent than Orlando, I think Orlando like paved the path a little bit. And that's why I'm kind of with Austin, where I think these games are going to be competitive. I think the series might go longer than some are expecting. But ultimately, I just don't, I don't know how consistent the offense can be for the Knicks. They also get very one-dimensional in terms of kind of the ISO heavy Jalen approaches, and I think that's not a great recipe against the Celtics. I think you need to have a little bit more diversity in your offense against their defenses.
Yeah, to that point, the Celtics were first in catch and shoot makes per game, and then they were like last in the first round. Only Houston had fewer in the first round. Credit to Orlando, which they've done all year. That's nothing new for Orlando. We've seen teams do that, and in general, like teams try to do that, and like it almost never works. But Orlando's been comfortable with that. They've been doing it all year there. And then on the other side, I mean, I think Jason Tatum absolutely kills OG Anunoby. They're not going to set enough help. He's had a really huge series against them, 34 per game here. So I think Tatum's just going to absolutely carry this offense, going to get massive 3-point volume here. Jaylen Brown looked pretty healthy down the stretch of the last series, played 41 in game 4 when they were kind of getting back on track there. But yeah, anything, and then, Derek White, seeing Mikal Bridges probably on both sides. I think Josh Hart's going to guard a little bit of Jaylen Brown, but on the Boston offense, do you think anyone besides Tatum could kind of like carry them or, could hinder them a little bit? Austin.
I actually think this could be a pretty big Kristaps Porzingis series. I think Drew mentioned or I'll let him mention the bet that he may have liked, but I kind of agree. I think I'm not really sure why he was why he didn't play that many minutes in Orlando. My guess was like kind of Missoula felt like they could get away with it, and like they have other pieces. But maybe if he's really nursing something, like maybe it's not a Porzingis series, but if he's healthy, it does seem like He may not get as many favorable like post ups, like cross matches that they like to do, but I think bringing Porzingis into ball screen action is something that they can really go to and get Cat, defending actions. Just getting Cat defending in space, I think, is something that could be really valuable. So it could even get to a point. No, I don't. I was going to say there could be a point where they put Josh Hart on Porzingis, but he's just so small. I don't think so. Or unless you think that's.
I think they might start that way, but we'll see. Because I think they are concerned about that. But the issue is like it helps limit the ball handler a little bit more, having Hart in that action as opposed to Towns in that action, but it does not do anything to stop from KP from getting open looks. And the Cat in the action, the concern that you have is that Cat kind of overhelps and that leaves wide open, and then you're in rotation for KP shots. Hart in the action, he's a little more likely to kind of shut down the action and allow like a potential switch from there. But then you've got KP who can just go right to the free throw line and call for the ball and post up, and like KP's there's no path that KP doesn't get good shots in this series is the way that I'm thinking through all of this with the way, unless the Knicks are like, yeah, well, we're going to let Tatum and Brown have a layup line on pick and roll. And so I think it's going to be a very good KP series. I couldn't believe this number when I saw it on Caesars yesterday when I was scrolling through series betting stuff, but I took KP most 3-pointers in the series at plus 5,000. So 50 to 1. I hit it and it immediately went to 30 to 1. It's 30 to 1 now on Caesars and 21 to 1 on FanDuel. And I don't think those are bad prices. Obviously I think 50 to 1 is way better. But I think the 3-point volume could really spike for Kristaps Porzingis in this series, even if they move to Hart on him, which is to try to help neutralize some of that pick and roll action. Kristaps has such a height advantage over Hart, and he's just willing to let it fly over anyone he has a height advantage on. He does not care if he's got 6 inches on you. He does not care. He's just going to rise up and shoot the ball. And so I don't see ways that Kristaps Porzingis does not get good shots in this series. And I think that is. One of the, like, Tatum has had his way with Anunoby. He hasn't had any issues with Anunoby in the past. In the regular season, he destroyed the Knicks over and over again. But I think even if he does, if there are any limitations, or if Bridges and Anunoby really show up, I still think the Celtics' third outlet has a huge advantage. So, like, that's the big challenge with defending the Celtics, is that they've just got too many points of attack that can really challenge you. And obviously, like, we haven't even gotten into Derek White, taking advantage. Like, Brunson's going to be hit on Drew, I'm sure. But Derek White's going to be the next option that's going to be, thrust into kind of more favorable spots. So the Celtics are just very deep with offensive talent.
That's kind of what I was going to say with this whole, Hart on KP thing. I don't think they're going to get there. For one, Tibbs doesn't do that. He doesn't really like to play the cross-match game. And two, like you're saying, if you do that, then you're putting Cat on Drew. I don't want to put Brunson on Derek White. So I kind of think they're going to kind of play it straight. I'm sure it'll be.
I'll just note in the last matchup, I'm pretty sure. Let me just check the schedule on this, because I know this because I pretty much routinely bet Kristaps Porzingis first 3-pointer make of the game against the Knicks. Like, every time he is active against the Knicks, it's a routine bet for me because of the drop coverage. And I remembered the last game that they played. The Precious Achiuwa took the matchup, I think it was, instead of Karl Anthony Towns. And I'm just trying to find the spot, if I'm right on this game being the last game that they played, or if it was a different game that they played. But that was like my memory of like, oh, I didn't get the first shot up because they immediately did. It wasn't Cat in drop. Maybe it was 2 games before that. But that was one thing that made me think, oh, maybe they'll go to Hart. But like, I'm not even concerned if it's Hart because the size advantage is just so big for Kristaps. So however they match up, I think it's going to be challenging for the Knicks dealing with Kristaps Porzingis in this series.
Yeah, and then on down the line here. Good.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, the Spider-Man meme. I kind of feel like this will be Cat and KP because they kind of, KP's a much better rim protector, but they kind of like scheme-wise defend the same way. And like, they both like to attack the way that the other person defends the scheme the exact same way. And I can already envision a time where like one comes and hits a trail 3 or a pick and pop 3, and then the other one wants to get back on the other end and hits them with another transit. Like, I could see some point in the series where there's kind of dueling threes against each other because they don't like like how many times have you seen Cat or Porzingis give up a three to the big and then come down on the other end and try and do the same thing back to them? And so because they also defend each other the exact same way, like I could see kind of this 3-point off between those two. I agree with Drew that like this could be a big 3-point volume series for KP. The only thing I would disagree with is I think if it is Hart, which I don't think it will be much, I think KP might sort of put him under the rim more so. But I think if
for sure.
Cat on KP, like it could just be pick and pop city or trail 3 city.
Yeah, he's such a good post player, one of the best post players in the NBA as well. But yeah, on the bench here, the Knicks bench, Deuce McBride was really bad in the Detroit series. I think he averaged 3.8 per game. Did not shoot the ball well. Looked really small against Detroit's size there. We saw Mitch Robinson, cut into him a little bit. Was kind of the lead guy there. So anything there, and then the Boston part's easy. Like I think Al Horford's going to be a really, really big impact player with the way that the Knicks have some size, add some shooting there. He's pretty comfortable guarding Cat as well. So certainly, I think Horford could kind of play so much that he's like cutting into Peyton Pritchard a little bit. But Dink on this bench, obviously Boston has a way bigger advantage to me. But who on the bench do you think could kind of make a bigger impact besides Horford, if you want to add Horford?
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys. I mean, if I was Boston, they are very comfortable going to a lot of the like double big stuff, obviously like Horford Porzingis, but Horford Cornet and different things. I think I'd be trying to avoid that stuff a little bit more against the Knicks personally. Like I think I'd want less of Mitch Robinson out on the court as much as I could. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that because the Celtics are always so comfortable with that and they have a lot of trust in Luke Cornet. But I kind of would rather not in this series. I'd rather kind of get, make the Knicks have to play the two big stuff against my spread lineups and just get as many threes up as possible. So I'm wondering if you see a little bit of de-emphasized nature from that. And then I think if that is the case, I think, it's a ripe series, an opportunity for Deuce McBride to play a lot and be the primary like sixth man off the bench for the Knicks, but he's got to shoot the ball better. Obviously, like he had shots in the first series, but 26% from three, 26% overall ain't going to cut it. So I think the way that I'm thinking about how these teams will try to like play with each other, I think it might end up being more Deuce McBride minutes and less double big overlap stuff from the Knicks than we saw in round one. But interested to get your guys' thoughts there.
Yeah, I don't know. Ever since he returned from that groin injury, I just haven't really liked what I've been seeing from Deuce McBride from an energy standpoint, from a spacing standpoint, from a defensive standpoint. He just doesn't look right since he returned there. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Cornet could get de-emphasized, but like I said, this is more of a product of Al Horford kind of getting pushed up and being like, not like one of the lead bench minute guys in the second round, honestly. But yeah, what do you think on this layout, Austin?
I agree that this is like a really good matchup for Horford. Like if KP didn't exist, you'd be like, wow. If Horford was starting center, you'd be like, this is a really good matchup for Horford. Like he can kind of stand up Cat and he can space the floor. I think on the Knicks side, I would kind of say nobody. Like there isn't a single bench piece that I like here versus Boston. Like every single Mitchell Robinson is I think by far the most talented of the bench players in general. Like he could be starting for a lot of teams. But in this matchup, like I don't really like the matchup here versus Boston. They're tough to offensive rebound against, and like you're going to hurt him spacing wise, and just kind of like he has to defend in space. So like I'm not feeling Mitch Robinson matchup wise this series. And then like Cam Payne's probably the next drop coverage beater outside of Brunson that you would want on the floor, or like just even playing them together. But then you have to deal with a lot of size and defensive concerns, and like Cam Payne's going to get destroyed on defense by Tatum and Brown. And then like McBride, I think you want defensively, and McBride can kind of guard up and kind of like hold his own better on crosses. But like Miles McBride takes really poor shot quality shots. And so like if you watch the series, I think the casual fan will be like, McBride will have a game where he might score 12 points on 5 buckets, and you're gonna be like, he's having a good series. But it's like, well, no, Boston wants him to take that shot. Like Boston's game plan will be let McBride take the pull up long two that like it looks good, but it's not really a good shot. And so like I think I wouldn't want McBride taking the shots that he will get. So as crazy as this sounds, like if I were Tibbs, I'd play some Shamet here. Like Shamet is a little small, but I think he like competes on defense. And like I don't think it's an offensive series where he's going to get a lot of wide open threes because Boston doesn't help. But I think just like having another piece off there that they can't help on and sort of like isn't a complete defensive liability is like, I don't know. I would play Shamet, but I don't really like any of these bench pieces.
Yeah, I think Cam makes very little sense here unless he's kind of got the shot going. We saw that big fourth quarter in game one. But yeah, think anything you want to add, or it sounds like I'm probably most Boston from Fields here. But yeah, anything you want to add, and go ahead with your pick.
I mean, some of it might be, homerish and wanting this series to go deeper as well. Like, I
Hmm.
would love to see the energy in Manhattan if the Knicks can like really threaten the Celtics in any way, shape, or form. But official pick, I will go Celtics in 5.
Okay, I thought we might get a 6 out of you. I think Austin might be going 6. Austin, where you at?
Yeah, I am. Celtics in 6. I think it'll be one of those where like, like the older brother's playing the younger brother in the driveway, and like the older brother keeps it close for a long time, but then when it really comes down to it, he's gonna put his foot on the pedal. And so like I think it's gonna be a very competitive sort of like Celtics in 6, where the Knicks are in every game, and it's a really quote unquote good series. But like, is anyone really sweating that the Celtics will eventually win? So yeah, a competitive Celtics in 6.
The Wanted to get your thoughts because I think Mike is on the other side of this line, Austin. But Knicks plus 2.5 in the series is at plus 100.
I would lean that way for sure. I
Yeah,
think
the
like
Boston
it's
side's minus 130 with the wide rake. But I was just looking at that. I was like, coin flip for Knicks to win too.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't think it's far off. Like I think but I was thinking that would be more like minus 115, minus 120.
Yeah,
I'm
I
I'm gonna
jumped.
look at it. I
Uh,
haven't I haven't looked at a ton of like prices on like derivatives other than sort of just like the series price. So this is kind of just my off the cuff thoughts. Like that sounds pretty good to me. I'm gonna look into it more. I
You can
think the
also
one
get
thing,
actually on FanDuel over 5.5 games is plus 116. So that's the better way to play
yeah,
that.
right, right.
Yeah,
The
I'm
one
on the
thing I
other
think I
side. Go
disagree
ahead.
with
Good.
you guys on is that like I don't like the bench for the Knicks, and I don't think it's a great series for like OG offensively. But the one thing I'll
yeah,
disagree with you on is that I do think like if you were to construct a two-man unit to try and beat the Celtics, like defense, there's no good answer. But the best answer is like Brunson Cat is sort of like your drop coverage beater, and your stretch
yeah,
five is about as good as
Mhm.
possible of a two-man game to try and beat Boston, especially because Boston has shown very low willingness to sort of like completely help off and change their scheme. Um, and like OG and McHale are good enough shooters that like it would have to be hard that you help off of, right? So like I don't really see Boston needing to or wanting to sort of bend how they defend typically, and I think they're just fine letting the Cat Brunson stuff happen. So like, could that work enough times that because Boston's a huge like a very high variance team, the amount of three pointers that they shoot, it's kind of like less likely that they'll, even though they're a better team, it's less likely they'll sweep than a team that like, I guess what I'm saying is if the Denver Nuggets played a team that was equally worse, the gap was between the Nuggets and whoever they were playing versus Boston, whoever they're playing. I think the Nuggets are more likely to sweep because their variance game to game is lower. Boston just
Mhm.
shoots so many threes that like this won't be a sweep in my opinion. The Knicks will find a good variance day. And can they find two? I kind of lean yes. So I do like the plus 2.5.
Yep. I'm on the other side. I got a good price though. I got Celtics minus 2.5 at minus 105. So I
yeah.
feel
So yeah, that's a much better price than the market's giving now.
yeah.
And like I said, I think the cleanest way if you are a Knicks supporter in any way, shape, or form, because they are not beating the Celtics in 5 games or fewer, is over 5.5 games is plus 116 on FanDuel. I
Yeah.
think that's the best. That if I nibble at this series at all, that's where I'd be going. But I don't think I'm ultimately going to bet it after getting wrecked in round one on series bets.
Yeah, I got Celtics in 5. Feel pretty good about it. I would bet more if I could. I'm already maxed out on it. I just don't. I don't think they have enough answers, man. Unless the Celtics completely shoot like crap. I just think that it's going to be too hard for the Knicks to score enough here. All right, so last game we previewed the series and not very well because the Cavs got absolutely tattooed in game one. I mean, my God, 19 threes to 9 to the Pacers. That was the story. Andrew, I was like, hey, if this is a series, it's going to be Andrew Nemhard, and Andrew Nemhard goes for freaking 23. Absolutely, just catch and shoot festival over rotation. Just really, really poor defense from the Cavs, which was basically what the Bucks did, just over rotating, leaving guys open. Same thing happened here again. Darius Garland didn't play, but we won't spend too much time on this. But Austin, what did you kind of learn from Game One and a big Pacers win?
Yeah, I will sort of caveat that like this is the one game that I had on the background, so I wasn't like super locked in on every possession. But I will say, despite them losing, I actually feel like we handicapped it well, and I feel good about our
Mhm.
position. Shot quality metrics had Cavs winning by a ton. Also, in the press conference, Kenny Atkinson mentioned their in-house shot quality metrics. He said he looked at it at halftime, and they were holding Indiana to the second percentile in shot quality. So like everything that you look at kind of backs up. And then he said he didn't see it at the end of the game quite yet, but like Andrew Nembhard hit some crazy shots at the end. Like the Pacers shot 53% from three, and the Cavs shot 23%, and it was still a close game. And they didn't have Darius Garland, and like I was wondering how Kenny Atkinson was going to shorten this rotation as sort of like it got to the grind, and like he's playing it the way I would, like more Jerome, still Dean Wade, and I think the guy who's going to get cut out next is Isaac Okoro, which he either go to 8 or Garland comes back and replaces him. And either way, like he's kind of shaping it in the way that I would want them to play it. So like I I don't think that we said a lot of Cavs in 5, like that seems unlikely now. But as far as the way that we handicapped it, I actually feel like we did a decent job personally.
Yeah,
I'd also note that the Cavs -1.5 line right now is priced worse than it opened at. I think I was looking at this late last night. Let me just check if I can find the line again. But my point being is that if it's even the same, because the nature of the games flipping, right? Like there's more home games for Indiana now, then the market is saying, so yeah, Cavs -1.5 is sorry, no, I was wrong. It's plus 140 now. We bet at -180. Let me check the other prices. Maybe it moved a lot last night.
I was gonna say I'd be surprised if it was a similar or better price after losing.
Yeah. Well, that's why I saw it. Maybe I must have misread something, because I thought like, oh, this isn't like we handicapped this really well if the markets are reacting that way. But yeah, the shot quality stuff was distorted between the two teams, and the rim points and the pressure on the paint. Like, and I also think like, I think there were a lot of different adjustments that Cleveland can make to shorten things, and Indiana kind of shortened things from the start, right? We eventually saw Thomas Bryant and we eventually saw Ben Shepherd for like very short stints, but they were basically playing a 9-man in their best 9. So I think Indiana, which Rick Carlisle did a great job recognizing, like, hey, we've got this one for the taking. Let's extend our main rotation. Let's not like play 11 and let's go for the throat. And they did a great job. Rick Carlisle is a great coach. But yeah, Nesmith and Nembhard continue to play exceptional in the playoffs, and that's what really keeps elevating Indiana. I think Cleveland still just has a different level, a different juice. We saw the Avalanche in the third quarter. I thought that was going to kind of carry over and be the difference. But ultimately, like, Indiana just kept hitting big shot after big shot. And not only de-emphasizing like Isaac Okoro, like playing him less, getting Garland back at some point, which maybe they will, maybe they won't. But also I thought like, I still think one big at a time lineups are going to be your best bet. I like more DeAndre Hunter, more Ty Jerome out there, one big at a time with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, especially for closing situations, like especially when they were trailing late in the game. I was so frustrated with Kenny Atkinson having both out there when they need to generate 3-point volume. I just think Jared Allen like is a little bit fish out of water in this series when he's being spaced to the corner at the 3-point line to guard Miles Turner. Like, Jared Allen, if he's not able to be the primary like in-action defender or paint rim protector, is a little bit out of water in terms of what value adds defensively. And then he was having a hard time keeping up with the pace, getting up and down, and had a couple different spots where like they kind of mixed up coverages when they got down on, because they were, Pacers were playing fast, and he kind of was supposed to be the man getting out to the 3-point line, and he couldn't close out because he was gassed. And so I just think in general, like playing a little bit smaller for the series is something that I'd like to see Cleveland entertain a little bit more, especially as they get healthier whenever Darius Garland comes back.
Yeah, health's a concern. Garland missing that game, and I'll know DeAndre Hunter had to get his finger popped back into place, according to Chris Fedor. I listened to his podcast this morning, so that's a concern. But yeah, go ahead, Austin.
I was going to say, like, what I find really funny is like 99.9% of the time in these series, it doesn't matter how much favored one team is. Like the team that's the underdog always has these quotes that like, we think we're better, no one's picking us, we're going to win. But in this series, like both teams are so gentlemanly about acknowledging that the Cavs are the better team. I don't know if you guys listened to any pressers, but like the Cavs were humble about it, but like sort of like they mentioned that they didn't have Garland, and Kenny mentioned that the shot quality stuff I referenced, like we kind of allowed the shots we wanted. And then on the Pacers end, like Halliburton in his press conference acknowledged that the Cavs are the best team in the East. He just said that straight up. He didn't say they were the best team in the regular season. He says like, I know we're going up against the best team in the East. He didn't talk about the Celtics. He didn't talk about himself. He said the Cavs are the best team in the East. And then Rick Carlisle mentioned, like they asked some questions, sort of, I'm paraphrasing, about how what did you learn about the team today, or like do you think that this team's a lot closer, like they're you guys are actually the better team. And Carlisle basically, he's really sharp. He basically admitted like that they were the worst team and they're leaning into variance and they won the variance battle. And like he mentioned how like the Cavs are trying to limit threes and he's trying to implore his guys to get more threes up because that's their path to winning. And like if you look at not just the 52% from three, but like 36 attempts, they almost matched the Cavs in 3-point volume. And the starters for the Pacers don't usually shoot threes. Like Nembhard has 6, Siakam had 5. Like he's telling his team the only way to win is to sort of like increase the variance play and try and win 4 out of 7. So like I find it hilarious that both teams are like not quibbling there. It's the anti like Rockets Warriors like fighting every possession. They kind of just both agree the Cavs are the better team. Let's see who can actually win this series. So like both teams think the Cavs are better. I still think that the Cavs are going to win the series.
Yeah, pretty much with you there. Anything you want to add, Dink? And do you still feel kind of that it's going to be kind of 5 or 6 now?
I mean, I think just the nature of the way that the series shakes out, right? Like if I liked Cavs in 5 before, now they've got to win 4 out of 5 with those games being more tilted towards Indiana in terms of home court versus road court. So, I mean, I think Indiana stealing one early already like shifts my perspective a little bit more towards Cavs in 6, Cavs in 7, unfortunately.
Yep. I still think Cavs in 6 is kind of where I'm at now. Like you said, they've got pretty good looks overall, and they'll get Garland back pretty soon there. All right. I think that's going to do it for today. Anything else you want to add, Austin? I think we're good to go.
Nope. Nothing on
cool.
my end.
And then, Dink, you want to wrap us up to get us out of here?
As always, appreciate you guys tuning in. If you are listening on iTunes, Spotify, please consider leaving a rating and review and helping us circulate this content. If you're checking us out on the video edition on Established Run NBA's YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to the channel and getting more video editions of this podcast. If you're interested in checking out any of our premium packages on the NBA side of things, establishedrun.com/NBA-subscribe for more details on the premium product offerings.
We'll be back on Thursday. We'll have mostly the game 2s in the books. We'll have one game for the Warriors and Wolves series here. So appreciate you guys listening. Catch you guys next time.